There's a report today in the Daily Telegraph about David Lamy's difficulties with people like Viktor Orban, Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu. But he's not alone as a senior politician in a high position as a foreign secretary, prime minister, not liking particular members of the international community. Mrs. Thatcher quite famously had a very tetchy relationship with Menachem Begin, and I suspect that goes back to Begin's responsibilities in the bombing of the King David Hotel. And so I think it's worth making a brief comparison between David Lamy's stance towards Benjamin Netanyahu and Mrs. Thatcher's stance towards Menachem Begin. There are difficulties in both tone and approach towards the Israeli leadership. Lamy, as Foreign Secretary now, stresses the importance of upholding international law, and his support for the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Netanyahu underscores a strong stance on accountability and the legal ramifications of alleged war crimes. Lamy advocates clearly for Palestinian statehood, highlighting the consequences of its absence, such as the continued occupation or the need for equal rights in a single state. And his statements are direct and unequivocal, based on legal principles and human rights aligning with contemporary diplomatic and international legal norms. Thatcher is known to have found Menachem Begin to be the most difficult man to deal with, her words, describing his West Bank policy as absurd. And this reflects her frustration with Begin's policies, particularly regarding Israeli settlements in the occupied territories. And despite her criticisms, though, Thatcher maintained a pragmatic approach, recognizing the emotional and political support for Israel within the UK and the broader geopolitical context, particularly the impact of the Camp David Accords. There is quite a famous photograph of her shaking hands with Menachem Begin, and I think it was staged in such a way that she couldn't avoid it, but I don't think she wanted to have that photograph. Her government was open to engaging with Palestinian representatives, but set clear conditions, such as the PLO's recognition of Israel's right to exist and the renunciation of terrorism. She had a cautious approach to balance, and a cautious approach towards the interests of Israel and the necessity of addressing Palestinian aspirations. Her tenure during the Cold War, where geopolitical alliances were crucial, and the UK's stance towards influence was influenced by that strategic interest, is perhaps to be contrasted by Lamy's tenure, which is marked by contemporary concerns over international law, human rights, and the role of the ICC in global justice. Thatcher had to navigate strong domestic support for Israel, especially among the British Jewish community, which influenced her cautious engagement with the PLO. Lamy's statements reflect a more modern diplomatic environment where public opinion and international norms on human rights are more pronounced, and the support for Israel is significantly more compromised. His attitude towards Netanyahu is characterized by a firm commitment to international law, a moral and legal stance towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think it would be good to hear David Lamy's commitment to the state of Israel, the unequivocal commitment to the state of Israel, while at the same time maintaining his criticism of Netanyahu and of Netanyahu's government specifically. It is possible to hold these two things together. I'm sure that's closer to his position than some of the newspaper reports which are bubbling around. Margaret Thatcher's approach to Menachem Begin was pragmatic, strategic, balancing her criticisms of Israeli policies with the geopolitical and domestic political realities of her time. And I think David Lammy could learn a great deal from her fortitude, resilience, and example. But both approaches highlight the evolving nature of our diplomatic engagement with Israel, the historical context, the political priorities, and the need to secure this remarkable initiative in the late 1940s of establishing the State of Israel. And we must balance that with the with nurturing democracy and human rights and the rule of law within the Palestinian community and the wider Middle Eastern bloc. I think a first call is to recognise the state of Palestine. Other European countries have done so. We should follow suit.